Hi kids, and welcome back to my channel, The Literary Lounge. So today I have brought for you a critical appreciation of the next poem in queue, that is Keeping Quiet by Pablo Neruda from your book Flamingo of Class 12 CBSE. Right? So this poem Keeping Quiet, it is a deceptively simple poem. I mean, if you read it in one go, you wouldn't understand what is the hidden meaning behind this poem, the hidden idea, right? And it, focuses on the need for a little bit of introspection, soul searching, which may help us make peace with ourselves and also with others, right? It will be a global sort of, coming to terms, peace. It tells us how a moment of silent introspection will make us realize the utter futility of our aggressive endeavors. Now, by aggressive endeavors, the poet simply is trying to, point towards all this mass scale deforestation, right? Setting up of industries and manufacturing of automobiles, everything which is in very slowly killing the planet, right? This is what he is, trying to tell you, the readers. Now, this poem is in all manners an awesomely splendid poem, right? Penned by Pablo Neruda, and it dwells on a quality which seems to have been lost in the buzz of the 21st century, the quality of silence. In an age which accepts rush in a celebratory gesture, right? Everyone is in a rush and they actually enjoy it, they celebrate it. Keeping quiet is a gentle reminder what life can be like in a brief moment of a silent pause, okay? Now, the message provided by the poet in this poem, the message of silence, this message instantly resonates with one in the digital age where switching off has become a much needed life hack. All of you are aware what a life hack is. The theme of quietude and stillness is accompanied with the themes of peace, the theme of pacifism, fellowship, solidarity, right? Brotherhood, justice, and also ecological conservation. To keep quiet is to stay still and understand that one is a thread, a tiny strand. All of us, the human beings, we are tiny strands woven within the exquisite fabric of the cosmic order. It is to identify oneself with all, right? And in doing so, escape the sadness of never understanding ourselves. That is very prime focus of the poem, the poet in this, work. To keep quiet is to escape the death with which we threaten ourselves and for once, only once, truly and genuinely live. So according to the poet, till now we are not living. We are just doing, we are, cogs in a machine. We are not using our brains. So for that we have to keep quiet and, introspect ourselves. Give it a thought, a calm thought. Now at the heart of this poem, the very heart, is inclusivity. The poem seeks to rise above racial and linguistic differences. That is why the poet is asking you to keep quiet, because when you keep quiet, that language of silence will have no linguistic superiority. You must have heard about the term linguistic chauvinism in the first chapter, the first lesson, which was called the last lesson. I have explained that in detail in the chapter. So when you speak languages, there will be differences. And the poet wants us to come together without any discrimination or differences. That is why he is asking you to keep quiet. हमें कोई भाषा use नहीं करनी है. Now this attempt towards inclusion is seen in the opening lines of the poem. The speaker employs the collective we, hum, to begin the exercise of keeping quiet. Now we will count to 12 and we will all keep still. The count till 12 may be interpreted as signifying the 12-hour mark of the clock, from which the two hands circle in a monotonous manner, very much like the daily activities of our life. So it is, worthy to note here that keeping quiet is as much about staying silent as it is, about staying still, which is why the poem advocates for a ceasing of words, right? A stoppage, right? Let's not speak in any language. And actions, let's not move around so much. Why? Because language brings differences. It creates differences. The great number of languages on the face of the earth seem to highlight the ways in which we are different from others. We have different cultures. The use of the words any language suggests that the speaker recognizes the limits of language. Okay? And he envisions a state beyond the domain of language itself, the realm of silence, which has no language, which is common to everybody. Keeping quiet then is also about letting our differences dissipate, okay, diminish, go away in the silence of our similarities. The moving of arms not only, harks back to the ceaseless movement of the hands of the clock, but it also, tries to, put forth the gesture of restlessness and aggression, which the modern world is obsessed with. Now, one must remember that this, poem, it was published in Extravagaria, right? It was a collection of poems, and Keeping Quiet was published in it, and it was featured is a later work of Neruda's and has an overall universal tone. This poem, the collection was a product of well-garnered experiences of Pablo Neruda and frequent traveling. He was a very, avid traveler. He, traveled frequently. And Neruda also served as the Chilean ambassador in Spain, Mexico, and France. And he was also a pacifist. A pacifist is a person who tries to bring about peace between warring nations or states. Okay. Now, this hectic pace of busy life is what makes silence an exotic movement. Exotic means something very rare, like you must have heard about exotic fruits, like the dragon fruit, which is not commonly available. So it is exotic. So here also, this hectic pace of busy life is what is making this silence exotic. Okay, it makes it rare. Like the clock, our lives have become utterly mechanical, dominated by rush and engines. Like you go to school, then you go to your coaching, then you have to go back and study, right? So everything has become mechanical. This was just an example, okay? And notice how the pace of the poem itself is slowed by the use of anaphora in line number 8, without rush, without engines. You can, see what anaphora is in the YouTube shorts, which I keep posting from time to time. Anaphora is, a figure of speech in which words repeat at the beginning of successive clauses. So here you can see in without rush, without engines, the without is repeated in both these clauses. So it is anaphora, okay? And it can also be used in phrases or sentences. The fact that Neruda uses this rhetorical device to slow down the very pace of the free verse precisely when he is imagining a world without rush is a poetic masterstroke wherein the form and content fuse into a seamless unity. Now, the consequent movement of silence will not only be delightful and rare, like the exotic movement, but also a strange one. This is because we have internalized rush to such an extent that silence, though enjoyable, has become unfamiliar to us. हम इतने ज़्यादा बिजी हो गए हैं इस रश में कि साइलेंस जो है इट हैज़ बिकम अ थिंग ऑफ द पास्ट. वी हैव फॉरगॉटन व्हाट साइलेंस इज. For silence has become rare in this modern era. Thus, keeping quiet is one powerful way of escaping the mechanistic motion of the modern life, of escaping this busy and tight schedule of our lives. Now, Pablo Neruda was quite, aware of the exploitative economic structures of the world, okay, of this capitalist economy, right? And it felt in line with his political ideology, okay? He was, a bureaucrat, a pacifist. He was an ambassador, right? And according to him, this capitalist economy, not according to him, but this is a universally agreed phenomenon, a fact. This capitalist economy has exploited man and animals alike. So this aspect of his writing, this vision of his, is felt in lines 11 and to 14. Neruda was painfully aware of the history of exploitative colonial practices used by European settlers. Right. One example is our country. We were also a British colony, right? And these, settlers, these colonists, in their bid to extract resources from the Americas, he was also aware of that. He was also equally aware of the exploitative neo-colonist practices carried out in his own times by, large, mostly American corporations. In fact, he has written a poem titled "Standard Oil Company," speaking against the oil drilling practices of corporate giants, which pose a great threat to marine life. पानी के नीचे की जो ज़िंदगी होती है, जिसमें आपके एक्वेटिक लाइफ होती है, उसको कितना बड़ा खतरा होता था, वो भी उसने उसमें हाईलाइट करी है. एंड द पोएट वाज वोकल अबाउट हिज सपोर्ट फॉर कंजर्वेशन ऑफ marine resources and marine life, which is reflected in many of his poems. Now, man's greed not only leads to the exploitation of other creatures, but of also, their fellow beings, human beings, who are oppressed by the unjust economic system. And the poet strongly sympathized with the working class and very well understood the strong class divisions that had fractured the Chilean society of which he was a resident, right? The sufferings of both the workers in salt mines and sea creatures in the ocean would end if only everybody kept quiet for a moment. The theme of environmental conservation and social justice makes its presence strongly felt in these lines, please remember. Now, these lines highlight the devastating consequences of war. I mean, everybody is aware what war creates. War only creates destruction and death, nothing else. लड़ाई जब भी होती है कुछ नहीं मिलता सिवाय मौतें होती हैं, दुख होता है, दर्द होता है, तकलीफें होती हैं. It seems that all the troubles in the world, from the plight of the whales to the horrors of war, result from someone's inability to keep quiet. Somebody in some corner of the world takes an unnecessary action, which, jeopardizes the fate of everybody else, puts everybody else's life in danger. By writing, a very good example is the war between Ukraine and Russia, right? Who is bearing the brunt? Who is bearing the brunt of this fight? The people, the common man, right? So, by writing about those who prepare wars, the speaker is hinting at the manufactured nature of war. War is something which is not natural. War is not natural. It is manufactured. It is created by political differences. So, this, manufactured nature of war, which is intended to satisfy specific interests of interested parties and devastate the lives of others, is mentioned here. The damage done by the conventional chemical and biological weapons, green wars, wars with gases, with fire, can be stopped only if and when governments and nations teach themselves to keep quiet. To keep quiet means to refrain from war, कि वो लड़ाई ना करें. Neruda had been a witness to the atrocities committed during the Spanish Civil War under the regime of dictator General Franco. He had seen war in close quarters and very well knew what victory with no survivors looked like. Neruda को इसका first hand experience था. Significant is the assassination of the writer and his dear friend Federico Garcia Lorca by the fascist forces. Fascist forces कौन-कौन थी? Germany, Italy and France. Okay? ये fascist forces थी जिन्होंने पोएट के एक फ्रेंड को जो कि राइटर भी थे उनका असैसिनेशन कर दिया था, उन्हें जान से मार दिया था. Neruda had this to say about the Spanish Civil War. The war began for me when my friend started disappearing. Neruda के लिए वॉर क्या है? जब उनके दोस्त गायब होने लगे. It is a reference to his dead friend who was a writer, Federico Garcia Lorca. If only we could keep quiet, people waging such wars would put on clean clothes. All these people who are creating these wars would put on clean clothes, free of the blood stains and guilt, and would be able to walk hand in hand with the brothers in the shade, in silence and in peace. Now, in these lines, the poet makes it clear that what he is advocating, what he is, promulgating, right, shouldn't be confused with total inactivity. For, total inactivity means death, and he has nothing to do with death. I want no truck with death. In his own words, I have no truck with death, and he simply wants you to stop for a while and introspect what you are doing with earth, with people, and with other creatures on the planet. What are we doing? We are killing each other. Not literally, but symbolically, in many ways. Now, these are perhaps, among the most insightful, full of deep insight lines in the poem, where a stark reality, a naked reality of the modern life is, put forth, is highlighted, of being intensely caught up in the web of rush and activity, to the extent of not understanding ourselves, our true self, our own being. It is the tragedy of the modern world, where people are too busy to live, right? Too busy in earning, in filling their coffers with money. If everybody kept quiet for a single moment, a huge silence may interrupt the sadness of being too busy to understand ourselves. Our inability to keep quiet results in our failure to understand ourselves and others also. The monotonous rush, this boring rush of life, makes individuals threaten oneself with death, and the failure to keep quiet make nations threaten each other with wars. And this is what is happening everywhere in the world. Thus, this silence which results from keeping quiet isn't only an exotic one, not a rare one, it is also an introspective one, where we will get time to think about what we are doing. It is a soothing silence. It is going to soothe the senses. And it is something which is going to happen globally, that can heal the self-inflicted wounds of humanity. Now, all these wounds, according to the poet, are self-inflicted. हमने अपने आप को ये सारे घाव, ये जख्म दिए हैं. Okay? So, the poem ends on a positive note by saying that perhaps we can learn the importance of keeping quiet from nature. How? Perhaps the earth can teach us, as when everything seems dead and later proves to be alive. What happens during autumn? All the leaves, the trees shed their leaves. सारे पेड़ों की पत्तियां गिर जाती हैं. But after, some time they start getting revitalized, rejuvenating. फिर से उगाती हैं. जो बीज होते हैं उनमें पौधे निकल आते हैं. So for a moment it seems that the earth is dead, but then after this, very short silence, the earth comes back to life. These lines bring to light a very important fact. The mere movement and rush should not be confused with life. Perhaps this is the mistake we have been committing all our lives, right? What mistake have we been committing? We were confusing movement with life. We have confused movement with life every now and then. Perhaps this is why we need to keep quiet, to know the difference between mindless movement and meaningful living. सिर्फ काम करना, अपने ऑफिस जाना, वापस आना, ठीक, घर का सौदा लाना, this is not life. Life must be meaningful, it must be lived fully, right? Living life king size. Perhaps this realization may help us appreciate life, and perhaps this is the reason why the poet helps us remain with this realization before quietly exiting the scene, okay, at the end of the poem, letting us, the readers, fully understand, absorb, okay, and appreciate what it means to keep quiet. So we must know how to appreciate life. You can ask this to a patient, who has, who has been inflicted with cancer. He has very little to live. He knows what life means. But a man who is extremely healthy does not know the meaning of being healthy and having life. Now I will count up to 12 and you keep quiet and I will go. Okay? So he exits the stage and he leaves this to you to introspect and make amends. हमें अब सारी चीज़ें जो हम गलत करते आ रहे हैं उन्हें ठीक करना है. So this was a critical analysis of the poem. Hope you understood. In the next video, I am going to explain the poem in simple language, word by word, and also tell you all the literary devices which have been employed by the poet. Till then, you have a good day. Bye-bye. Perhaps this is the mistake we have been committing all our lives, right? What mistake have we been committing? We were confusing movement with life. We have confused movement with life every now and then. Perhaps this is why we need to keep quiet, to know the difference between mindless movement and meaningful living. सिर्फ काम करना, अपने ऑफिस जाना, वापस आना, ठीक, घर का सौदा लाना, this is not life. Perhaps this is the mistake we have been committing all our lives, right? What mistake have we been committing? We were confusing movement with life. We have confused movement with life every now and then. Perhaps this is why we need to keep quiet, to know the difference between mindless movement and meaningful living. सिर्फ काम करना, अपने ऑफिस जाना, वापस आना, ठीक, घर का सौदा लाना, this is not life. Life must be meaningful, it must be lived fully, right? Living life king size. Perhaps this realization may help us appreciate life, and perhaps this is the reason why the poet helps us remain with this realization before quietly exiting the scene, okay, at the end of the poem, letting us, the readers, fully understand, absorb, okay, and appreciate what it means to keep quiet. So we must know how to appreciate life. You can ask this to a patient, who has, who has been inflicted with cancer. He has very little to live. He knows what life means. But a man who is extremely healthy does not know the meaning of being healthy and having life. Now I will count up to 12 and you keep quiet and I will go. Okay? So he exits the stage and he leaves this to you to introspect and make amends. हमें अब सारी चीज़ें जो हम गलत करते आ रहे हैं उन्हें ठीक करना है. So this was a critical analysis of the poem. Hope you understood. In the next video, I am going to explain the poem in simple language, word by word, and also tell you all the literary devices which have been employed by the poet. Till then, you have a good day. Bye-bye.